If you want to understand how power really works in Washington, not just who holds office, but who shapes the ideas behind these offices, then you need to understand this story. It doesn't begin with a president. It doesn't begin with an election. It begins in 1973 during the Nixon era, when three men decided that conservative ideas weren't losing because they were wrong, but because they weren't organized. Those men were Paul Weyrich, Edwin Fuellner, and Joseph Coors. And together, they built something that would eventually become one of the most influential political institutions in modern American history. This is the story of the Heritage Foundation. And here's the blueprint. Before Heritage existed, there was a memo. In 1971, Lewis F. Powell Jr., then a corporate lawyer and soon to be Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, wrote what would be later called the Powell Memorandum or the Powell Manifesto. It wasn't a court opinion, it was a warning. Powell argued that America had gone wrong after the Great Depression and Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. In his view, the country was strongest during the Gilded Age, before regulations, before labor protections, before the modern administrative state. And he didn't just complain. He laid out a plan, a step-by-step strategy for how business, interests, and conservatives could reclaim power through media, academia, courts, and policy. Weyrich and Fuellner read it and thought, what if we built an institution to carry this out? Their goal was clear: create a conservative counterweight to the Brookings Institution, and they found their first major backer in Joseph Coors. Yes, that Coors, who seeded the project with $250,000. Soon after, billionaire Richard Scaife stepped in, pouring tens of millions into the foundation over the next 2 decades. Heritage was born. From the margins to the White House, at first, Heritage was small, especially compared to Brookings or the American Enterprise Institute. But it had two things others didn't: religious conservatives and cultural warfare. It wasn't just about economics. Heritage took on abortion, family structure, morality, issues that energized Christian conservatives in a way traditional think tanks didn't. Then came 1981, and just days before Ronald Reagan took office, Heritage dropped a bombshell document, the Mandate for Leadership, a 2,000 policy recommendation, one clear message: shrink the federal government and do it fast. Reagan loved it. He loved it so much that he handed a copy to every single cabinet member. And by the end of his first year, about 60% of those proposals had already been implemented or initiated. Heritage wasn't advising power anymore. It was power. Time magazine called it the foremost of the new breed of advocacy tanks. And even the Soviet Union noticed. After Reagan met with Mikhail Gorbachev, the Wall Street Journal reported that the Soviet leader complained that Reagan was being influenced by, quote, Washington's conservative think tank. And guess who that think tank was? That think tank was the Heritage Foundation. Institutional power through the George H.W. Bush years, Heritage shaped post-Cold War foreign policy and backed the Gulf War. During the Clinton years, it went on the offense, fighting healthcare reform, fueling the cultural wars, and influencing welfare reform. Heritage didn't just react to politics anymore. It set the terms. It launched the Index of Economic Freedom with the Wall Street Journal. It helped define the contract with America. It normalized the idea that think tanks could function as a political command center. Crisis, controversy, and radicalization. After 9/11, Heritage backed the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and defended Guantanamo Bay. But cracks began to show. By the Obama years, Heritage found itself in a bind. opposing the Affordable Care Act while trying to distance itself from the fact that it had originally proposed the individual mandate. That individual mandate had originated in a Heritage Foundation study, and in 2010, it launched Heritage Action, shifting from policy shop to political enforcer. Then came Jim DeMint when the former South Carolina senator took over in 2013 with a $1 million annual salary. He transformed Heritage into something sharper, more ideological, and more partisan. Scholars quit. Papers were shelved. Internal dissent grew, and controversies followed. None more damaging than the resignation of Jason Richwine. He authored a dissertation titled IQ and Immigration Policy. In his dissertation, Richwine wrote that illegal Hispanic immigrants to America had lower IQs than non-Hispanic whites, and noted that this disparity persisted for several generations. Heritage's reputation as a scholarly institution was quickly fading, but its political relevance, that was about to skyrocket. With Donald Trump, Project 2025 in the pipeline, in 2015, Heritage initially mocked Trump, but once Trump secured the nomination, their demeanor changed. Quietly, Heritage activated a database and had been building since 2014. Thousands of conservatives were vetted to staff a future administration, and after Trump won, Heritage had more influence over his transition than any other institution in Washington. At least 66 Heritage affiliates entered the administration. Cabinet members included Betsy DeVos, Rick Perry, Jeff Sessions, Scott Pruitt, and Mick Mulvaney. Heritage later claimed the Trump administration adopted 64% of its agenda. And that brings us to Project 2025. In April of 2022, Trump stood before a Heritage Foundation audience and praised the project openly, calling it the roadmap for his movement's return to power. And when you look at who wrote it and where they ended up, it's not hypothetical. For instance, Lindsay Burke, for the past 17 years, she has been at the Heritage Foundation. Her most recent role was the Director of Center for Education Policy. And on June 6th of 2025, she was appointed as Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Programs for the Department of Education. And one of her most recent commentaries was titled, "No, we do not need the Department of Education after all," written in March of 2025. And then Ben Carson, who wrote the HUD chapter. And now he sits on the Establishment of Religious Liberty Commission. This commission is a commission that is comprised of predominantly Christian pastors and bishops with a few Jewish rabbis added to the mix. Not to mention the likes of Pam Bondi, Dr. Phil, and a former Miss USA runner-up. And now we have Brendan Carr, author of the FCC chapter, chairs the FCC, openly stating his alignment with Trump's agenda while being accused of politicizing an independent agency. No, this is not a theory. It's a pipeline. Under current President Kevin Roberts, Heritage has openly embraced what it calls institutionalizing Trumpism. It has reversed positions on Ukraine. It has promoted election conspiracy theories, helped fund efforts to publicly target civil servants. Whereas once a free trade, pro-intervention think tank, Heritage now champions protectionism, executive power expansion, and national conservatism. As the Wall Street Journal put it, Heritage no longer questions whether power should be centralized, only who should control it. So when people ask, well, how did we get here? The answer isn't just elections. It's an infrastructure. It is planning. It is 50 years of institutional patience. The Heritage Foundation did not chase power. No, it built a system and infrastructure that power walks into. And whether you see that as visionary or dangerous depends on what you think government is for and who you think the government should serve.